MP accuses government of cutting school funds. Impact on education. In a bold assertion that highlights a pressing issue, Saboti Member of Parliament MP Amisi has laid blame on the government for its decision to cut funding known as Capitation for secondary schools. He argues that this move is not just short-sighted, it represents a serious disregard for the country's future. Amisi contends that these cuts to capitation fees pose a direct threat to education, which he believes plays a vital role in fostering socioeconomic progress in Kenya. How can we expect to position our nation competitively on the world stage if we fail to invest in education, a fundamental equalizer that offers everyone a fair shot at success? Amisi posed this critical question during an event where bursary checks totaling KSS 71.7 million were distributed to school heads. The MP also highlighted a troubling contradiction. While the government promotes ambitious economic development strategies, it does not provide the necessary funding to turn these strategies into reality. He raised concerns about the effectiveness of the competence-based curriculum, which has been hailed as revolutionary but is not functioning as intended. How can we aspire to emulate the growth rates of countries like Korea and Japan if we don't have the educational foundation to support that growth? He remarked. There's also a looming controversy regarding the functioning of Parliament itself. Amisi expressed frustration over what he sees as greater executive control over legislative processes, indicating that this hampers the Parliament's ability to fulfill its responsibilities. He claimed, the President and my party leader have complete sway over how parliamentarians cast their votes, which severely undermines the autonomy of both the National Assembly and the Senate. In the initial round of bursary disbursements, assistance reached 15,000 students, while a subsequent phase is expected to support an additional 9,000 students soon. Additionally, Treasury Cabinet Secretary John Mbadi has communicated to the National Assembly Committee on Education that the government is currently unable to maintain the full capitation rate of KSS 22,000 for each secondary school student. Instead, it is presently providing only KSS 16,600. Amisi's comments spark deep conversations about how educational funding directly impacts the nation's future. But here's where it gets controversial. How should a nation prioritize its budget between different sectors? Do you think education should always come first, even when other areas are in dire need? Share your views in the comments. Mass layoffs and campus closures in Kenyan universities. What you need to know. Imagine a future where universities are forced to shut down campuses and lay off staff due to financial struggles. This might seem like a distant reality, but it's a harsh truth that's looming over the education sector in Kenya. As we delve into the latest news, you'll discover that the situation is more complex than you think. But here's where it gets interesting. The fate of universities is intertwined with the country's economic landscape, and the ripple effects will be felt far beyond the campus walls. The Treasury Cabinet Secretary, John Mbadi, has hinted at plans for mass layoffs and closures of satellite campuses in public universities. This decision comes as no surprise, given the unsustainable funding model that's been plaguing the education sector. The government is struggling to provide adequate funding, and the universities are feeling the pinch. As reported by Citizen Digital, the CS expressed that government would be forced to take radical measures, such as job cuts and outsourcing non-essential services, to ensure financial sustainability. But what does this mean for the students and staff? The universities will have to restructure and reduce unnecessary administrative costs, which might lead to a more streamlined and efficient system. However, it also raises concerns about the quality of education and the impact on the community. And this is the part most people miss. The government's decision to reduce funding for universities will have far-reaching consequences, from limiting access to education to affecting the overall economy. On a related note, the Auditor General, Nancy Gathungu, has raised alarm over the new university funding model, citing irregularities and a system that denies deserving students vital support. The report highlights critical failures, including the allocation of money to students who had deferred studies. This is a clear example of how a flawed system can have devastating effects on individuals and society as a whole. Now, let's shift our attention to the banking sector. Moody has warned that Kenya's heavy reliance on domestic borrowing is likely to crowd out private sector credit. This means that banks will be more inclined to favor government securities, making it harder for individuals and businesses to access loans. The Treasury plans to raise nearly 2/3 of its financing from local sources, which will increase pressure on banks and worsen debt affordability. In other news, the government has proposed a law to regulate grids like the Kenya Union of Savings and Credit Cooperatives, TASCO. The SACCO Society's Amendment Bill 2025 aims to regulate secondary SACCOs and provide a framework for their operations. This move comes after the Cash 13 billion scandal, which highlighted the need for stricter regulations and oversight. Lastly, let's take a look at the real estate sector in Nairobi. According to Haas Consult's latest property price index, rental prices in Nairobi suburbs and satellite towns dropped marginally in the second quarter of 2025. This decline could be attributed to tough economic conditions, which have made tenants more price sensitive. As a result, landlords are holding off on rent increases to retain tenants. As we conclude, it's essential to consider the broader implications of these developments. The fate of universities, the banking sector, and the real estate markets are all interconnected, and the decisions made today will shape the future of Kenya's economy. So, we ask you, what do you think is the most critical issue facing the education sector, and how can we address it? Share your thoughts, and let's start a conversation.